Are more and more people leaving the left, or is the left leaving the people? Let's talk about it. So hi everyone, my name is Jack. Welcome back to my channel. Today I would like to do a sort of different video. I'm just going to have an honest conversation. No editing. I will try to keep it brief, but I don't think that is going to happen because I have quite a lot to say. But due to recent events that happened in my life, I would like to open this with an apology. And I think what I feel, I can apologize for in this case is while I hold certain views, which I stand by, and I believe these conversations, that I'm introducing and other people are introducing as well, although it is a small minority of people, are important and they need to be had. And we can't keep living in this polarized world of black and white. And if you speak on something, then you're canceled. We don't want to hang out with you, lose your job, et cetera, et cetera. So I do still believe all those things. Now, I think I'm still proud of most of my content. I think I've approached situations from a position of compassion mostly and nuance, trying to see the balance of both sides and being relatively moderate, but then coming to my own conclusions based off what I know right now. And, I'm open to my mind changing, very much so. And that's why I feel like it's important at the moment to take accountability for this, because I don't want to play the victim or, pawn things off and say that, I can never be wrong either. But I think obviously in this whole venture, I got a bit carried away in a few of my videos where I was commenting on certain people that were spewing a certain belief or narrative about something going on with them. And because I think that those situations aren't particularly good for our younger generation and actually causing a lot of harm to the LGBT community, I decided to shed light on that by making a joke of them. And I can see how people can view this as, bullying, being mean to a specific individual. And I want to concede on that matter. I agree with you. I think, we can all get carried away sometimes. We can all lose sight of what we're doing and, do something for clicks rather than just the cause. And I guess it's a strange phenomenon to me because I've been off social media for so many years, and I am a person who is generally quite silly, can get carried away with stuff. But when I take a step back and take on that feedback, I wouldn't want an individual, like just one person, to feel singled out. Even though I do make lots of other videos where I react to a TikTok, but I feel like in those I am just analyzing what's going on and expressing my thoughts, and I will continue to do so. If I change my opinions on things, then so be it. I will say that, I will flag it. But, in a world where everything's being put on social media and kids are subject to all of this and, we have all these echo chambers, I think it's important to have another voice, especially from the LGBT community. So we understand that a lot of these thoughts, they're not just coming from a right-wing conservative movement in terms of challenging some of the things about the LGBT community and pushing back on some of it. And, I am gay, so there's so much about the LGBT community that I really love. And I have many friends who are LGBT as well. So I think it's just as important to challenge behavior that is potentially bringing us down and causing people to not take us seriously, as it is to, fight for our rights and fight for acceptance. We need both in tandem. So before I get into it and talk about why I left the left, classic, so many people have done that, I just want to react to two of the TikToks that I took down, because those are the two where I really felt like I took it too far. I had to look through all the rest. I don't agree that anything else is too much. And if you are offended by any of those, I am sorry about that. And if it offends you, then you have every right to be offended. And I respect that. I think, personally, I feel like these issues should be allowed be talked about. So let's look at them now. So this was one of them that had 37,000 views. So, it was a shame. It was difficult for me to let go of that one, but let's have a look.
I got misgendered at work on Wednesday by someone that has been corrected before, and it just hit me hard. I was 3 hours into my long shift. I don't even remember how long it was, maybe 8 hours, my 8-hour shift. And I immediately was like, no, I need to leave. So I left. I went home. And since then, I have been spiraling, which is not a fun thing to be dealing with when you are a broke person living in New York City and need to pay rent. So I'm getting ready to go to work right now, go to my other job. I called out last night, and I'm having to talk myself into showing up today. And to all of my trans friends, to all of my trans followers, to any trans person that stumbles upon this video, I love you so much. I love you so, so much. I know how much this hurts. I think for a second I got too comfortable and I forgot how much this hurts me, and I lost my usual coping skills. And so that's what I'm trying to work on now. I thankfully have people in my corner that are helping, but it's hard to get help when your instinct is to cut everyone off and refuse help. So to my trans friends, to all of the trans people watching this, I love you. I love you so much. To all of the cis people watching this, watch yourself. Check yourself.
Okay, so I cut this down and then I did a parody of it. Okay, I won't go over that, but let's just talk about it. So anyone who watches this and agrees with it, I really struggle to understand. I think, why do we feel it's okay to be sending the youth of this society a message that to have such a low amount of self-worth in terms of how you view yourself, that you need the rest of society to validate your feelings about yourself, meaning that, you are non-binary or all of these other identities, or otherwise, you need to leave your job. It's the opposite of what we should be teaching people. We should be teaching people that, what's important is how you view yourself. Self-worth comes from within, self-love comes from within. If you try and seek your happiness from validation of others all the time, then it's a losing battle, because these people are being set up by these niche communities to believe that if they choose to identify a certain way or decide I am this, then it's this sort of false promise that society is just going to validate them and view them that way. And that's not the way the world works. Like, the world will never be that way. And, I can speak as a gay man that largely, like, the majority of people in this country accept me for who I am and, leave me alone, want me to live a good life. But, I can't deny that there will be people, and conservative religious people, that will always disagree with my way of life. And it's actually in their right to. I mean, if someone believes in God and they believe in it that strongly, that, my way of life is sinful or whatever, like, let them do it. Like, I don't care, Them thinking this thing about me doesn't change how I view myself, because I'm actually quite happy with myself, and I'm happy with how I've dealt with my sexuality, many, many other things, and we should all be teaching our youth to, work on yourself. And it's not about getting validation from a whole group. And also the fact that, you're leaving your whole job because you were misgendered. I mean, do I need to say any more than that? You're giving up income and money because someone didn't call you they, them. Like, is this the world we're supposed to be living in? Is this, I mean, how is what I'm saying cruel and mean, If this person believes a certain thing about, her identity, then that's great. I mean, if it gives her peace and self-worth, although from this video, it kind of seems like the opposite, actually. It kind of seems like she's having a false expectation upon both herself and society. And the thing about it is, as well, she does not look like she's upset, right? She's, and I'm not going to parody her, I'm going to stay away from that, but she is styling her hair, even though she doesn't have any product or anything, her hair isn't moving, but she looks so chuffed with herself, like so pleased with herself, and she doesn't look like she's spiraling. Now, I acknowledge that she probably is in pain, and she's probably dealing with some shit, right? So that's why, again, I apologize for making a joke out of it. But I think we're sort of teaching kids who are lacking a sense of identity in this world where everything is about social media and, who's more attractive and who has more followers, blah, 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 that to find your identity, you can just like adopt this sort of label, but it's so much more complicated than that to learn about who you are. And you may be going through other things, like other mental health struggles, and you're projecting it onto this scenario of being misgendered. And then that becomes the all-consuming nature of what you're doing. And you can see the whole cult-like behavior in this, because she's saying, everyone who's trans, I love you. And that should also be not how the world works. We should be seeing people as individuals, you know, oh, I love all gay people. That's insulting. I find that offensive because you're suggesting that just all of us have some sort of attribute that's, you know, deemed worthy of love, whereas we should be looking at everyone individually. And there's a lot of issues that I have with the trans movement and trans activists, which I've expressed on the channel. And I will get into that more today. But hopefully people can see where I'm coming from, you know? I don't think this is a good message. I think it is harming young, impressionable teenagers who are on TikTok. And I'm not afraid to say it, okay? I'm here, I'm calling it out. And there you go. Okay, so let's watch the next one.
All the pretty girls want like this. Pretty girls walk like this. All.
Okay, so this was probably the furthest away I got carried. And again, I apologize. I accept that I was wrong in that case. Having your elementary schoolers ask if there's two of you because they saw you be femme one day and mask the next. No. I'm saying no. I'm pushing back on this idea because when I grew up, teachers were just teachers. Like they were there to teach us stuff. They were there to teach us maths and you know, science and English. They weren't there to get their validation from the kids about their identity and confuse the kids. That the kids are like, oh, are there two of you? I'm so confused. That's weird. That's bizarre. Like, why is that important to you? And this is the issue, is that like a lot of these people, they don't get as much validation from the rest of the world because a lot of what they're doing doesn't make sense. So it's easiest to start with the kids. And when you want the world to adopt a certain ideology that isn't based in fact, the easiest way to start is with the kids. And you're going to say, that's so ridiculous, it's an overreach, whatever. There have been many, many news articles about the sex ed that's going on in schools. And instead of learning about reproduction and, you know, learn about gay sex, STIs, all of that important stuff, they're also learning, or maybe more focusing on, what are your pronouns? And this is very young kids, you know? I didn't even know what a pronoun was when I was that age. And getting them to explore internally from an age that young on their gender identity, I just don't agree with that. It's confusing. Kids are not designed to be that introspective, you know? And I do believe in gender identity in a sense, and I will get back to that at some point in this video, but not everyone has one, you know? Some of us are just like, oh, right, I'm male, and then that's it. But you're teaching kids, okay, we're going to learn about pronouns, and these are all the different things you can be, and some people are born like this, but, you know, they're assigned male at birth, but then they feel something else, and they feel neither or, they feel a combination of both, and then you have all these different flags and all these different words. So if I'm a kid and a teacher, especially a woke LGBT teacher, is saying like, this stuff is also amazing, you know, I'm not going to want to be the cis straight boy, am I? I mean, the clever ones would probably say like, this stuff is BS, but it's actively encouraging kids, this is palatable and appealing, and the other versions, like the normal versions of male and female, which we all are somehow boring. And not only that, but I'm going to get you guys to validate my identity. And this is indoctrination. Like, that's the definition of indoctrination. I don't care if, you know, this is the right arena for this, but schools should be about learning, in my opinion. Shouldn't be a place where you're discussing political ideas, okay? It's up to every family how they raise their kids. And if you want to raise your kids religious and conservative, that's your prerogative as parents, okay? It's not up to the teachers to do that. And I think it's inappropriate. And would I want any child to grow up feeling unsafe because they're gay and that they have to hide their sexuality because they're religious? 100% no. 100% no. I think that's despicable. However, we live in a free society, and we live in a society where parents have rights over their kids, and I will do anything to protect that. I mean, I don't think that we should ever walk away from that. So, harmful, okay? You can say what I did was harmful, fair enough. This is harmful, this is weird, it's bizarre, and you can say that it's kind of a form of grooming, all right? And just going back to that first one, you know, she said, you cis people, you better watch out. This is the hypocrisy of it all. You know? Okay, one group is allowed to talk shit about the other and generalize and say, all of you cis people, watch out. But if you get on here and you're like, all you trans activists, watch out. Then that's somehow a problem. Oh, but one group is oppressed and one is not. You don't know what people go through. And a lot of people don't even like being called cis because it's ridiculous. But no, I don't like being called cis. Oh, well, you have to adopt the label, but yet we have to use all of your pronouns and accept that we're called cis. So those are my thoughts on those two. Let me know what you think. Maybe people that challenge me on this, I doubt you're watching this, but maybe you can kind of see more on coming from now. And it's absolutely fine if you disagree also. So now I want to get into this story time, and probably going to be here for a while, but if anyone is interested in this, you know, I would appreciate you hearing me out and kind of seeing where I'm coming from, maybe watch it in segments, or, you know, if I'm somehow interesting, which I fail to, sometimes I fail to understand, you know, it might be something you have some popcorn over. So I titled this video, Why I Left the Left, and I just want to start off by saying I'm not right-wing or conservative. I'm more of a nomad at this stage. I kind of feel like, you know, I'm kind of center. And when we think of political ideology, I think a lot of us have abandoned the pertinent issues such as, you know, the economy and education, healthcare, the border, all of those kind of things, foreign policy, corporate policy. And now politics all seems to be about social justice issues and just social issues, and then that's it. It's like if you believe in any right-wing values like individualism and small government, then, you know, you're put in this like racist category, which is just so ridiculous. So I would say that I have some at the moment, you know, left-leaning policies that I agree with and I like. And then I have some right-leaning as well. But it entirely depends on the state the country is in, you know? It depends where we're at now and what the country most needs, because when a country is more prosperous, then we can actually afford to be more left-leaning because we have, you know, more money, we have more power, and we can give back more. So that's how I see it. And then other times we need to be more conservative because we come up with crazy ideas sometimes. We are human. And then we need to say, oh, wait, hang on. So those part of the idea where it was good. And then we kind of need to scale back a bit on that. But also, it's not conservative in the sense that everything needs to stay the same. It's conservative in the sense of, you know, not as much government involvement and stuff. And there's more autonomy for the individual to go and live their life and not be penalized for it from like huge taxes and stuff. But anyway, I'm sort of rambling on this one. But, you know, I'm kind of in the middle, and I want to talk about how I sort of got led here, once being a very woke leftist, and also some other things that recently happened, which I think is important because it kind of depicts the issues I have with all of this. And some of this was quite hurtful, but there you go. So I have some notes here. I'm just going to be looking down on them. Okay, so going back to the beginning, when I grew up, I was never interested in politics. I just never thought about it. My family never talked about it. It wasn't talked about in school much. And I guess even when I was 19, I moved to the UK and I was going to drama school. And, you know, it wasn't a reason for me to then go into like think about politics because I was so busy and everything was just about musical theatre. And I was also living in a new country. So I was thinking, well, I'm going to understand even less about this. And I think when I was in second year, someone was saying, you know, you have to vote, like you need to vote because everyone needs to vote. And, you know, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I said, okay, all right, I will. But I didn't do any research, and I went and I just was like, okay, I'm just going to tick this one. So I voted for the Conservative Party. And, there's nothing wrong with voting for the Conservative Party, but that's really stupid. Like, I was very dumb to go do that. And I do think that if you're just ill-informed and you don't know anything, then it's not contributing, just doing eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So that was that. And then, even in drama school, the climate has changed so much. And this I'll come back to this in terms of what just happened in my life. But political issues were just never discussed, like barely at all. I think I remember when there was an election, people were like, oh, vote Labour and stuff. But when I told my classmate I voted Conservative, they were just like, oh, right. I mean, this person could have the very same reaction today for all I know, but there's a lot of people that probably would not. And now we have this culture of you can't be honest. But back then, no one talked about politics. And there was no talk about gender. Obviously, we talked about being LGBT sometimes, but even the transgender conversation was basically never brought up. And it was also an environment where people were lots of things, but people were at least able to take a joke a lot of the time. And people would joke about stuff like race and gayness. And, I went through 3 years of every time I entered a room, someone was just like, potato. And I honestly felt like sometimes people didn't really look beyond that. Now, I went through a period of my wokeness of being like, oh my God, that was so awful, like stereotyping. But like, I just think that's so bleak. It's dumb, It's a joke. It's actually kind of funny. And for the people that do find me interesting and my vibe, that's still going to happen. But it's not that big a deal. And there was a lot of that. Like, there was 2 black girls in my year who, I'm very fond of. And I don't know how they would feel about this now. And if they were offended by it, then I would totally understand that and respect it. I'm not saying you should not be offended by this, but people used to make jokes about like them getting people mixing the 2 of them up, and them being called like random different names that like sounded kind of black. And I guess no one really questioned back then, like, oh my God, is this politically incorrect? And maybe people did, for all I know, but the atmosphere that I was in, it didn't like suggest that was going on. And maybe people feel differently about this now. Maybe people don't care. I don't know. I think society is conditioning us to view all these things as like so serious. I'm not sure. But anyway, that was the kind of environment we were in. And I guess because of my experiences in life growing up, feeling like a bit of an outsider and not having much confidence myself, I spent the most part of my time at drama school, really trying to fit in and trying to people please and trying to fit a mold that just wasn't very me. And that's no one's fault but mine. I mean, I was doing the best I could, like all of us do. And it's a difficult time when you move to university and, you all go from your whole life living under one roof with one family for the most people. And that family comes with all these social norms and ways of living that is just so normal to you. And then you pluck out the youngest person from the family and go, okay, we're just going to thrust all of you into a dorm room together. Bye. See you later. It's so funny. It's like a reality show. And then all of us are like, wait, why do you do this way or not that way? Because this is how I grew up. So there's a lot to navigate, and I did struggle. I think a lot of people struggled. It was an intense environment. There's lots of pressure, lots of expectations. It wasn't like a normal university experience at all. I mean, none of us went out on a Monday to Friday night. I think there was one occasion when some people went out and it was like the scandal of the year, because we had classes at 8 a.m. every morning, and we would be literally in college for the entire day, and it was very physical. And I have so many fond memories from that time. I have lots of stuff I've reflected on that, weren't so great as well. But I sort of, because I was always trying to fit in and I always yearned for this kind of being part of a cool group or a clique, which I've never been able to fit into. And now I realize that, I actually never want that, because they're normally not particularly genuine. But at the time, I really did want that. And I changed myself for that, and it didn't work. When someone is inauthentic, it doesn't work. people see through that, whether they are consciously thinking it or not. So I left drama school, you know, still maybe not really having found myself in particular and knowing my values, kind of what I want to bring to the world. But I suppose on the friendship lens, things started to improve for me. And I made some really good LGBT friends, and all of them I'm still close with, still very fond of. And they've changed my life in many amazing ways. And that was the first time I sort of started to explore who I was and my values, because certain people I was friends with were very kind of open to that. And it was also, I didn't feel like there were any expectations for me to have kind of a performative character like lots of people do at drama school. And, you know, that's just not me. Like, I'm quite blunt, I'm quite direct, and a lot of people don't like that. But whatever, a lot of people in my life do. And I met a few people who just really liked me for me. And it was surprising, to be honest. Like, I never really had any gay friends. There was always a lot of rivalry between people at drama school and in other areas. I mean, it's a very competitive environment anyway, but it's particularly among gay men, I mean, wasn't very united. I felt like there was a lot of kind of bitchiness. And these, I suddenly was feeling so happy in that I kind of my like weird side and silly side, which I felt like I was always subduing, it really came out in these friendships. And for a period of time, I was so happy, and I was just loving having even just a few friends who I felt really liked me for me. And don't get me wrong, there have been people before. I grew up with people, and, you know, in drama school, I'm still friends with two people very, very well. And one of them in particular, we were like solid throughout the whole experience. And I still care about this person so much. So it's not like I never had it, but I think I'd never had another gay friend like that. And that was very important to me, because then I learned about all the stuff about my homosexuality and how that impacted me growing up. We would always talk about these things. But still, there was not really much mention of politics. It was about, you know, we discovered the nightlife scene, and we were going to gay clubs and LGBT spaces. And it was just about like fun and hanging out and the music. But after a while, I mean, this is in about 2018. And towards the end of 2019, there was a definite shift to things being less about the time you're spending with people and the fact that you are LGBT, but you want to have, you know, a safe space. It became a lot more about gender all of a sudden. And a lot of my friends, and I don't hold this against them whatsoever because it's great to an extent, but our nights out and parties became all about trying on all these different costumes and gender bendy stuff. And, you know, the term gay was pretty much abandoned. Now everything was queer. And again, queer wasn't a word that we used at drama school. At least I'm pretty sure it wasn't. You know, that's 2016. I graduated, fast forward 3 years, and then now everything is queer. And I feel like with queer comes a lot more than just describing what is LGBT. I think it's very much become this sort of political movement, especially in recent years. And it's also denotes a certain aesthetic of kind of abandoning heteronormative anything. And at first it was kind of playful with this group, but I didn't initially take to it, although I wanted to be there, and I didn't have a problem with it. I was just like, I don't really feel like, you know, wearing makeup and putting on like dresses and kind of having this like androgynous look. But what happened was, because these people were kind of both all so into it, and it was really special, I think the dynamic works better, you know, without me there, or without someone there who wasn't into it, because it was almost like a hobby, you know. So I kind of slowly stopped being invited to as much things. And this was also when I moved out of London to do my master's. So I was very isolated. I was living in an area where I didn't know anyone. And then simultaneously, I kind of felt like my friends were slipping away, and I was struggling to keep up. I was kind of going back to a stage where I was feeling really alone. And then I wasn't as conscious to it at the time, but I started slipping back into this people-pleasing mentality and wanting to be part of the group, and then starting to change myself to do so, because I was so terrified to lose this, because this was my like gay outlet. You know, I'd never had that before, and I'd never had these type of friends before. So I was going through such a dilemma at the time. So I guess what it translated into was, although I had questions around some of this stuff, I just sort of was like, okay, well, this is what the community is now, so I'm going to have to get on board with that. And I understand that this is kind of a fringe area. I'm not saying that at this time in 2019, all parts of the community became all about gender. I know that it's not that simple, but at the same time, I can acknowledge that a lot of, especially in London and big cities, that was the way most situations were heading. And the concept of us going to a gay men's night again, that was abandoned. And not only did everything become about gender, and then I started wearing these outfits and stuff. And you know what? I actually loved it, and I'll probably still do it sometimes. And I learned how to do makeup, and it was great. Like, I mean, I got to explore more of a feminine side and all of that, you know, while still knowing I'm a guy. And I really did enjoy it. But then there were other times that it became overbearing, because every night out had to have this look. And sometimes I was so exhausted in the week, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to like throw one of these looks together. And I wasn't having it. But it definitely reached an expiration date, you know, when people are a bit like, we're old, you know, can we just hang out? Anyway, lots of those moments were very, very fun. Very fun. And I had many special moments. But then there was a side to it that just went too far. You know, it wasn't just, okay, we're all going to do this stuff, but it was also anyone who is more masc or femme, more masc as a guy or femme as a woman, is automatically kind of less cultured and looked down upon. And people, it became a normal point of conversation of people saying, oh, these like masc gay guys, masc for masc, as derogatory. And then what also became normal in our nomenclature was, oh my God, a straight white man. This straight white man said this thing to me. Oh, they're probably straight and white. Or going into a bar and saying, God, this place is just so straight. And I readily adopted all of them. You know, I'll put my hands up, and I felt included. I felt like I had to get on board with this stuff. Some of it was conscious, and some of it was unconscious, subconscious. But I easily went along with it, and things built and built, you know. At the time, my new relationship was starting, and this did cause lots of issues because we kind of saw things a bit differently. And I was just putting so much pressure on myself to like cling on to certain friends and change myself for that matter. But, you know, I would never like blame any of them or think, oh my God, you did this and then I had to change myself. No, like it was my decision again. And I was like 25. So we all make our own choices, and I was struggling and I made those choices. So I guess that translated into political beliefs. So I started to be told things like, every white person is racist. And at first I was a bit like, okay, what, how? And then I was explained about, you know, privileges and microaggressions and how certain cultures have been oppressed. And you have this privilege because you're a man and you're white, and you have to be aware of that all the time. And the same thing for LGBT people, you know, lots of virtue signaling and lots of anti-men, anti-masculinity, all of that. And I definitely went along with it. You know, the political correctness was starting to build. And I noticed then society really taking a shift when the stuff with J.K. Rowling came about. And she was expressing her beliefs that, you know, trans women are not women, they're not the same, and we need to protect women's spaces, and that biological sex is important as well as how you feel about yourself. And of course, all the community went insane. And this was the kind of mindset I was in, was that I didn't even read her tweets. I heard about it, and then I was out at lunch with some people and someone said, you know, I don't think it's actually that bad. And I was like, oh my God, how could you say that? You're like, that's transphobic, blah, 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 blah. And I was just literally just parroting another person's opinion. And this is a huge issue that we have. It's so much worse now. People do not think critically at all. Some people do, not denying that. A lot of the time, people just don't. They just want to be on the right side. They want to be on the loudest side. And there was a part of me that just felt a bit like, oh, there was a niggle that I was thinking, this is wrong. Like, no one deserves this level of cancellation and death threats and doxing. This is wrong. And there were other scenarios. I mean, going back to the musical theatre industry, there was a very well-respected agent who had many very, very good clients on her books, all in musicals, on the West End, all in work. And she posted on a private Facebook group of agents saying, I'm going to misquote here, so feel free to tell me if I'm wrong. But I think it was something like, I'm so sick of seeing ad postings for BAME actors because, you know, I have lots of white people on my books and I can't find them jobs and all my people of color are like in work. I think it was something like that, but it was around basically commenting on the shift in the musical theatre industry of not just having equality and having opportunities for white and black people, but now it was actually, if you're black, it's actually a commodity. And we actively want to fill roles with black people because we're trying to correct racism. But it becomes an overcorrection then, because you actually get people who are not as good at the role. And some of them, don't get me wrong, a lot of these people are absolutely insane, like better than I could ever imagine myself being. But in some cases, someone might not be the best for the role, but they take it because it's inauthentic to me, you know? And not only that, but there were at the time, and there probably still are, but so many musicals that were actually about Black history, which I think is great. You know, Dreamgirls, Memphis, Tina, there are more. Ragtime, there are lots more. So those characters, you know, are meant to be played by Black people, and that provided even more work. But then we have musicals like Hamilton coming out and other musicals where, you know, white roles in the past are being erased for Black people to take them on. And somehow that's okay. Do people, like, other people see the kind of argument for this of it being a bit weird? But like, if you cast a white person in a Black role, that would just 100,000% not fly. Not fly. So after this agent posted about this, another agent, and this is how catty the industry is, he screenshotted it and put it on Twitter. And then within 2 days, she had lost all of her clients and was completely disgraced. And I really hope that a lot of these people reflect on that and realize how not okay that is. Absolutely ridiculous. That someone can make a valid point, a point that makes sense, saying, I have all these white actors, and literally every role that comes up is saying we want a Black actor. How is that racist? Like, are you guys serious? But at the time, I was thinking, God, this is like extreme. But I was kind of thinking, well, the majority are all acting this way, so it must be actually correct. Like, it must actually really be racist, and we need to be so careful about this, and we need to not talk about it and tiptoe around it, because obviously people get very hurt by this. That was kind of my mentality at the time. And I did not know how to think for myself at the time. You know, you kind of think everyone is interested in this thing and automatically it's valid, but we're tribal humans. It's the reason why people end up in cults, you know? So, and I don't blame any of those individual actors for making that decision, because when you're disgraced in the industry and casting directors feel like that or whatever, then obviously you're going to make the decision that's best for you. But the issue is that the people who actually have a huge problem with this are a small minority. And then everyone else just jumps on the bandwagon because they don't want to be seen as supporting it. And that's what's mind-boggling to me. Most people probably thought at the time, this is way overblown. She doesn't deserve to lose her whole career that she has spent years and years and years building up. And, you know, I heard controversial things about her too, but I'm putting those aside because she did not deserve that. And if you think that she deserved that, then you are twisted. But also fine for you to have that opinion. So we had all of these things going on. The 2019 election at the time with Boris and Jeremy Corbyn. It was just another world to that in drama school. I mean, my whole Facebook page was just everyone being so shocked and dismayed that Jeremy Corbyn lost. And there was this narrative that, you know, the Conservatives are just racist and homophobic and misogynistic, which is utter BS. Like, our Prime Minister at the moment is a person of color, or he's brown, however you want to say it. And I started to see that everything's super polarized, but I was only seeing one side. So obviously, naturally, like most people, I thought, well, this is the moral side, this is the right side. And somehow we convince ourselves that although the majority of the country voted Conservative, that therefore the majority of the country is hateful. But when we walk out into the world on a daily basis, that is not our experiences. Like, we do get hateful people. I'm not denying that. For the most part, in this country, people are quite pleasant. And we have to grapple our heads around this narrative that this political party is evil, but somehow the majority of the country voted for them. Like, those two things just don't add up. But somehow we happily walk about the world with this doublethink and don't even think about it. And the fact that people think the Tory party are right-wing is ridiculous. Like, they are liberal, just like Labour. There's pretty much no difference between them anymore. And when Labour comes into power, I feel like people are really going to learn that. All right. So, where was I? So, along with this kind of political stuff also comes this notion to adopt the mindset of oppressor and the oppressed. So we are told that to go out in the world to see all of these threats, all of these microaggressions, all of these people not understanding your experience, and we are taught to see those as a big threat. You know, it is a bleak mindset, and it is one in which is teaching the younger generation, just like that girl, to have no accountability for her behavior. Just because someone did not treat you exactly the way you wanted, that means you can act however you want, and because you are oppressed, it's allowed. And majority of people in the UK are not oppressed. I mean, think about the privilege that we have in this society. We can be whoever we want to be if we put our minds to it. You can go from rags to riches. You have so many opportunities at your fingertip, yet we have this woke younger generation who's just always so hyperfixated on calling ridiculous stuff out that just don't matter. Like commenting on a black woman's hair, saying, oh, those braids are so interesting. That's a microaggression. A white person having dreadlocks, that's cultural appropriation. Like, fuck off. Why are we spending our time wasting our energy on this ridiculousness? And I think in a world where we're constantly comparing ourselves on social media, and we're seeing some people really make it big for themselves, we see people have, in a matter of 2 years, huge illustrious careers, something that most of us could never imagine, become this massive celebrity just through the internet. And I think that these two things really go hand in hand, because so many of us are afraid of failing. And we find this so intimidating that instead of putting ourselves out there and saying, I can be whoever I want to be, it's easier to say, oh, well, because I am these things, then I'm never going to be able to achieve what they achieve because I'm oppressed. I have these things, I suffer from anxiety, I blah, blah, blah. And I'm not denying any of these experiences. And in some cases, people legitimately go through very homophobic things or racist things. But if you allow those things to define you and convince you that you can't be whoever you want to be, then the only person losing out on that is you. And there are enough successful black people, gay people, trans people that show this is not the prophecy, this is not the destiny. You can override that. You can rise above it. But I was going down this path, and I started to see normal scenarios of just a straight man who wasn't particularly my vibe, or maybe we didn't have much in common. I was always thinking like, oh, he's probably just homophobic. And that's very arrogant of me. That is like narcissistic for me to think just because someone isn't interested in me, or, just that it's automatically homophobic. And I admit that I was quite far gone in this. So there's probably a lot of you watching who did not go this far. And I'm not suggesting that in light of recent events that happened to me, that all these people are like this. Like, absolutely not. But I know that a lot of people are. And it's boring. It is tiresome. Instead of having fun and treating people like individuals, everything is about, well, what box do you fit in? And then therefore, what are all the things we're not allowed to say around you? And, oh, I can't wear this outfit because that is culturally appropriating your ancestors of like thousands of years ago or whatever, because they were enslaved. Like, sorry, babe, but you were not enslaved and I did not enslave you. And that's true. I don't have to feel white guilt, And it's all about the white people versus everyone else. But in actual fact, white people were also enslaved in many, many areas. And many white cultures were colonized. When the Irish people moved to the US after the potato famine, or during the potato famine, I think it was in the late 40s. I talked about it in another video. But we were so heavily discriminated against that people were conditioned to view us, as lesser than human. And that our whiteness, I hate that word, it wasn't as white as the Americans. And they noticed that we had this attribute of having a certainly shaped nose, maybe mine shaped that way. And they called it a pug nose. And Irish people were only given remedial, low-paying jobs. The discrimination was huge. And they removed our language. We were forced to only speak English. And then once America sort of got over it a bit, and it was sort of forced upon Irish people, well, you're now Irish American. You're not really just Irish. Then eventually they're like, oh, we love the Irish. I'm Irish, even though it's like my great grandmother was Irish. Therefore, I'm Irish, although I've never been to Ireland. Do you know Dublin? Sick of it. And they celebrate St. Patrick's Day more, dressing up as leprechauns, green parades. They don't have a clue what that holiday is about. Not a clue. And Catholicism was eradicated there. It was so heavily looked down upon. So people's languages were taken, people's religions were taken. What does that sound like? It actually sounds like indigenous people in America. But no, because you're white, it doesn't matter. So that's my rant about that. But, going into 2020, things got a lot more serious because of the pandemic. I think given the fear that everyone was in and having to stay at home, having a lot more time to ruminate on things, and then the online world getting even more polarized, I think this really fed into this divide that we have. And we saw that, with the vaccines. It was either, you are pro-vax or you are like pro-death. And anyone saying, well, actually, I think it kind of concerns me that they've rushed this product out. Oh my God, you need to protect everyone. And then we found out that the vaccine didn't even stop transmission. It just lowered your chances of getting it. So as a young person, lots of us could just not have got that. And older people could have got it. But there was no room for nuance at the time. And at this point, I was doing a job that actually I happened to be like traveling around the UK. I did leave the musical theatre industry in 2018, but that's a conversation for another day. And I was doing a job where I had to drive around the UK and train different areas on this thing, which I won't bore you with. But on the training course, one of the boxes said, your title, and it was like Mr., Mrs., Mix, and Master, blah, blah, blah. And everyone was like, what's the mix? And I said, I think it's for, gender neutral people. And every person, this was all in all areas of the UK. So like rural areas, Scotland. And everyone was like, what is that about? Like, that doesn't make any sense. You are male or female. And I agreed with them at the time. And I think I was by myself, so I was kind of able to think more for myself. But then as I moved back to London, I just didn't even think about it. I was just like, all right, this is correct. And If someone says they're non-binary, then they are. And then that's just it. They're like not a man or a woman. Okay. And I bought into it because the community was telling me this is the right thing. Like, this is correct and this is respectful. And the first time I heard, gender, it's a social construct. I remember it came up because me and one of my friends were doing like a stupid skit, and the person was like, "Oh, bagels, they're a social construct." And I thought, won't be funny to you, but anyway. And I said, like, what does a social construct mean? And then we proceeded to talk about, gender is a social construct. And I said, well, what does that mean? And then the answer is, well, men are expected to be stoic and, not cry and dress this way and be the one that earns the money. And then women are expected to cook and be at home, and they're more emotional and all that kind of stuff. It's all just a construct that we have created as a society and then reinforced upon people. And that's the thing about it is, this is where most people just stop. And they go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because it's palatable. It means, oh my God, I never have to kind of feel like I have to fit this role because it's always just been completely made up. And I'm going to get back to that when I discuss non-binary, because it needs to be addressed in this video given the comments I've received. But yeah, I mean, particularly in that case, it impacted my relationship or other relationships I had, because some people expressed, I don't really agree with it. And I just could not hear that. And it's similar to what's happening to me now. I was so averse to the other opinion that I just I couldn't have the conversation, and I got so mad and emotional, which is not tolerant behavior whatsoever. It's actually the opposite of progression. It's regressive to not let people give their opinion. And I thought I was on the right side of history. And I went from just blindly kind of saying, this doesn't make any sense, to then, oh, right, it does, without really any research or thought about it. And then, unfortunately, in a job, I was given the opportunity to run an extracurricular activity, which was basically on gender training. And it's designed to promote acceptance of LGBT people and awareness. And I actually feel like a lot of it is still very great. We teach people about being gay, about being bi, like the different sexualities. We teach people about transsexual people and what gender dysphoria is and the different ways people transition. And, that's very useful information for people to know. But then a large portion of the course was just entirely ideologically driven. And it was all about pronouns. It was all about, now we must use this gender neutral language, and we should all, the advice at the end was, how can you help? Put your pronouns in your bio. Don't use the word fireman, use the word fire people. If someone has pronouns, then you must respect them. And I thought I was doing the right thing, I'll get back to it because it's all going to be part of the non-binary discussion. But that became a big part of my life, and that gave me even more reason to not question everything. But I'm a rational person. Like, if someone gives me a valid argument, it's very hard for me to shut that out. And earlier this year, at the beginning of the year, I listened to The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling, and suddenly this really started to burst my bubble. Even though I was preaching this course, every time someone told me, like, I'm non-binary, there was a part of me, similar to those other situations that happened, there was a part of me that was thinking, that's great, but then a small percentage of me knew that it didn't really make sense. I'm sorry if that offends you. There you go. But her podcast really opened my eyes into so many things. I realized the danger with the trans movement in terms of self-ID and women's spaces, and women who've been raped in prisons because they've put someone who decided to identify as trans during his trial in there. Like, that's fucked up. And those people deserve for this to be talked about. And then what really confused me was the topic of kids transitioning. And this is something I literally never thought about before. All of it flew under the radar for me. And J.K. Rowling was saying, she was talking about how kids are too young to consent to it. And particularly young girls, it's difficult going into puberty and accepting that you are now kind of objectified by some men and started to be viewed sexually when maybe that's not what you want. Also get a period and everything. Like, I can't pretend to understand that, and there's probably a lot more involved, or some girls might feel completely differently, which is fine. But a lot, the spike in girls transitioning, it's gone up by 5,000%. Teenage girls identifying as trans. And that is not just because of more acceptance. Like, we do not see statistics like that in psychology. It just doesn't happen. And historically, the majority of trans people were always male to female. And there, you know, Ray Blanchard discovered that there were two main types. There was the homosexual type, where a kid is kind of gender dysphoric from a very young age and effeminate and non-conforming. And then you have, and people get mad at me, but this is the truth, and I'm interviewing someone who suffers from this condition on my channel, people who suffer from autogynephilia, where they, you know, view themselves, where they experience arousal and attraction towards themselves as a woman. So if you're familiar with, you know, the term transvestite or cross-dressers, but the thing is, a lot of these people started transitioning too. So it was always more men. But now we see this huge spike in women. And even at the time, I was sort of arguing with people about it, saying, well, like, what if you don't let them transition and then they kill themselves? And that was just a totally unwarranted statement. Like, I had no proof of that. But that was my argument. But then I was like, okay, I'm going to look into this more. And I started watching YouTube videos, documentaries. I read a few books, and it was like my whole bubble just burst. And I was thinking, my God, I have been on this side of history that does not make sense. And actually, there's a sinister part about it, you know? There's an issue. There are massive issues with this movement, and people think that at the moment, like, the left is just like the moral one. That's just completely false. And people will wake up to this, because when you think about far left ideology of communism and socialism, you know, they start with saying equality for all and lift up minorities. And, you know, we kind of share wealth more. And for the most part, that's quite nice. But then when it progresses, it's saying, okay, well, we all have to have similar values. And we all have to accept everyone for who they are. And now we all have to think the same way. Now we have to all talk the same way. And now we have to all think the same way. And that's the opposite of progression. It's literally the opposite. It's now we're in a world of censorship and lack of freedom of speech. People aren't a fan of Elon Musk. He bought Twitter so he could have some outlet for freedom of speech. Whether you're someone who's nuts or not. Now stay with me here. But people think that if someone is hateful, that their speech should not be visible. And it's the opposite. Because if we see extreme groups spewing narratives that are based in hate and fault, then it's visible. And we can say no. But for example, Holocaust denial is illegal in a lot of countries. France was the first country to criminalize that. And then fast forward a couple of decades, where do you see the highest level of Holocaust deniers? France. And do you know why? It's because when certain ideas breed underground and can't be discussed about openly, that indoctrinates people. It's a cult, you know? You get swayed into the idea, you're told all these convincing things, and then you're told, well, you can't talk about it. So if we talk about these things, we give these people a platform, then society can say, like, no, that's messed up. That's stupid. And that's why censorship on the left is so destructive. It's terrible. So I want to just move on to now where I'm kind of at these days, because a lot of you probably subscribers who are very kind and appreciate my content have watched my other videos, so you probably kind of see where I'm at. But in terms of my political views, here's where I'm at. So like I said before, I don't consider myself left or right. I'm kind of center. I'm trying to consider things on a policy basis. I think when it comes to social justice issues, I'm probably more right-leaning now, which is totally insane. But I think it's more because the left has moved so far left that people who were center are kind of basically right now. It's like the dial has moved. And the left is so hypocritical in terms of what they demand from society. People just think, oh, it's easy, just tax people more. Oh, it's easy just, let more people into the country, or it's easy just bring down the cost of housing. But people don't understand how extreme it is. I mean, how the world doesn't work like that. I mean, if you want to complain about the cost of living, and I know a lot of this to do with like international policy and oil and like Russia and Ukraine and everything, but if you want to complain about the cost of living and the cost of housing and the economy not growing and salaries not rising to keep up with it, but also say that anyone who is trying to clamp down on immigration is racist, you can't have it both ways, babe, because last year we had a net positive of 600,000 people enter this country, and all of those people have to be housed. A lot of them don't work initially and need a lot of welfare support. A lot of them don't bring high skills into the country that they can use to grow businesses and contribute to the economy and draw more money in. And that's just a fact, okay? But it's a dilemma because I don't want asylum seekers to not have safety here. Like, the thought of that to me is very unkind. But then it's the whole left and right ideals. It's saying, well, do we prioritize ourselves first and get us in a good place? Because we have people in this country working their asses off, earning like 70K a year or whatever. And their thought of buying a flat, even in zone 3 of London, is just it's inconceivable. So it's kind of saying, well, do we allow that to continue and continue sharing all the wealth? Or do we make some of these decisions? Do we make tough decisions to give some people what they want? And we see the same thing with the NHS. Everyone is saying you have to protect the NHS. It has to remain free. It has to be this glorified institution. And it's entirely broken. I mean, I've been through so many health issues in the past 10 years, which, don't want anyone to feel sorry for me, but I've been on waiting lists on the NHS for like two years at a time. And meanwhile, these people are struggling. Lots of them can't work because they're dealing with debilitating symptoms. So they're not contributing to the economy. And the economy is also paying for those people to be on welfare, but yet protect the NHS at all costs. Instead of what I believe is that we should have a very big portion of the NHS, which is private. And if you earn enough money, you pay, like £50 a month for health insurance. Like, does that sound so bad? Now, that £50, that just came off the top of my head. I have no idea if that model would work. But a mixed public and private system is needed. Healthcare has become so complex. There are so many more forms of treatment and specializations. And, doctors are not paid well in this country. They are overworked. They're unhappy. All of it's a mess, okay? That's where I'm at with that. I think I like the LGBT community. I think a lot of it has gone too far. It's gone very cult-like. It is, you must have these opinions or we don't accept you. And it's not about you as the individual. You're gay and you're an individual and let's have a community. And it's less about celebrating our history and how far we've come. And it's more about gender and how oppressed we are. And there's one prevailing narrative that we're allowed to have. And anything outside of that, you see Pink News, the most biased news organization. They make numerous claims all the time. We're speaking for the community. You can't do that. You can't say these are all our opinions and we're speaking for the whole community. I don't want to be involved in that. Your community are individuals. It's the same thing as like white and black people. Oh, you need to give black people more opportunities. That was one thing I was going to say is affirmative action. It's like the musical thing. Oh, well, we need to have a quota of black people per university or job. Like, that's racist. You're assuming that black people are not as intelligent and they need extra allowance. That's not progressive. It's just promoting more segregation. We need to start viewing each other as individuals, and it doesn't matter if you're gay, it doesn't matter if you're white, it doesn't matter even if you're non-binary. Cool. Like, you do you. But we don't need to, there are jobs now advertising for non-binary people. It's like they have a non-binary quota. Like, are these companies all right? So let's go back to the LGBT community because I'm getting a bit all over the place. I think when it comes to pride, I think that's gone too far. I think while it used to be about our history and being proud of who we are, now it's about a whole month of companies bringing out all this merchandise and branding themselves with these logos, basically profiting off it And it's been entirely hijacked by the trans movement. And I'm going to come to the trans thing because I care about trans people. But like the LGBT community is more than that. And people forget that these charities, Stonewall, etc., they are companies. Like they need to make money. They are there to make money. And their whole philosophy, their whole agenda was to get gay marriage legalized and get gay people their rights, and bi people and lesbians and bi. And so they kind of achieved that. And then it's like, okay, what do we do now? Because we need to be profitable. And, this is what's led to some of the trans activism. Like it's true. It's become so polarized and so one-sided that the charities are all pushing this, and a lot of it happened under the radar because they're then going to institutions like companies, public bodies, schools, and the NHS, etc., and they're telling them this is what you need to do to be inclusive. And who's going to say no to that? Because how bad does society feel for how they treated gay people in the AIDS epidemic and everything? People have that kind of guilt and they don't want to make the same mistake again. But the thing about it is, we still need to learn that when an oppressed group says this is what you need to do for us to feel accepted, we still need to learn that we actually can question those things. We're allowed to push back on certain ideas, right? So with pride, it's one problem is, we're liberated and we spent so long being seen as sexual deviants, so you need to let us like dress in all this fetish gear and sexual acts in a parade and be really inappropriate. But at the same time, pride should be for everyone and bring the kids, because we want kids to learn from a young age to accept gay people. And it's like, you can't have it both ways. And if parents are uncomfortable with that, they should be allowed to say like, no, like you're gay, that's great. But why does it have to have anything to do with like bondage gear? Right? Because that doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be about being gay as being about being really sexual. No, being gay is just liking people of the same sex. That's literally it, and then there's part of the culture or whatever. But if you want a pride parade where you have that stuff, I think that's cool. And I'm very pro sexual liberation. I've been like that myself in the past, but then it needs to be very clear on the dichotomy between pride for that and then pride for families. So that's another point. Let's move on to trans. So I've been accused in the past week of being transphobic and etc., all that. I care about trans people, transsexual people. These people have existed for a very long time, and gender dysphoria is a proven mental disorder, mental condition that is extremely debilitating and can cause many mental health problems in someone. And for some people, transitioning will help that. And I acknowledge that. There are some people who transition and it makes their lives a lot better and they are a lot freer. And this involves obviously taking hormones and sometimes in case surgeries. But it is still a very extreme thing to do. It's not just like, let's accept you as being gay. Cool. Now you can be with men. This is a huge decision to make, to change your body. Do you know what I mean? Like removing body parts, changing body parts, having all the complications. We still don't know what the long-term side effects of even being on cross-sex hormones are for your whole life. But having that said, it's a free world. As an adult, we should be allowed to do these things if they're available to us. And I recognize that it really helps people. And I know trans people. I mean, I would also largely view them as that gender, for socially, for the most part. And I would also use the pronoun, even if they don't particularly pass. I mean, if someone passes fully, then it just doesn't make sense in your brain to be like, let's call you by the other pronoun. But I think those views from me are quite moderate. And I guess, that means I do believe gender identity is real, because you can have the identity of the opposite sex, but be born in the other sex. And, whether you want to claim these people are born this way and it's like a biological element. I mean, I do think that there's probably some sort of biological component, similar to how there's a biological component to being gay. Great book you guys should read if you want to keep an open mind and see what led me to some of these decisions. Read The End of Gender by Dr. Deborah So. Read Trans by Helen Joyce. they're both respectful and they both explore lots of issues that need to be talked about, and the biological reality of levels of testosterone in the womb and how this can lead to non-conforming men, non-conforming women, and in lots of cases, gay and trans people. So there's probably a biological element, but then there are other cases of gender dysphoria being a consequence of trauma or abuse. And there are multiple ways in gender dysphoria and multiple ways out of it. One of the ways out of it is transitioning, or at least mainly out of it. I mean, some people may have an element of dysphoria for the rest of their life because they will never actually be the other sex. But in some cases, therapy and learning about a certain trauma is actually what people need to feel comfortable in their own body. And it's not transphobic to say so, because we have cases of this actually happening. People saying, I thought I was trans, but actually I was just dealing with being a lesbian, and I had internalized homophobia because my family's religious. So not transphobic to say so. But what I was so shocked is at all the stuff with the kids. It really shocked me that this clinic in London, the Tavistock Centre, which has been shut down, and God knows what they're going to do next, but that they went from, having 2 appointments a year, 2 patients a year, to then having thousands of people on the wait list. And their model was to give kids 6 appointments before making a decision. But what actually happened was they were under so much pressure from the wait list and the charity Mermaids. They are vile. Mermaids are vile, but so much pressure by them that they were giving some kids 1 or 2 appointments before referring them to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. And this is absolutely fucked up. Not afraid to say it. Anyone who thinks that kids 11 years old can consent to never having their natal puberty and transitioning to the opposite sex is absolutely twisted. Like, what is wrong with you? If someone had asked me when I was 11, do you think you're gay? I don't know. I wouldn't have been able to answer that question. But, all right, so you're gay. So now sign this form. You must be gay for the rest of your life. And if anything else happens, I mean, there's no way you can change that. Absolutely not. And in all the studies we see in the past, and trans activists just ignore these, we see that 60 to 90% of kids presenting with gender dysphoric symptoms grow out of it after we let them go through their puberty. And do you know why? Because our body's natural hormones have an effect on us. And for the most part, a lot of these people just grow up to be gay or lesbians, because being non-conforming as a kid is very typical of gay and lesbian people, which is why gender is not socially constructed. And I'll get back to that. But it's crazy. And these kids are being transitioned because, oh, well, how did you know he was a girl? How did you know she was a girl? Oh, well, from a young age, she just always gravitated towards dolls and dresses, and she didn't want to be with the boys stuff. This is it's the new homophobic movement. It is conversion therapy of gay people. And not only is it conversion therapy of them, but it is filling their bodies with hormones, puberty blockers, and giving them surgeries to cut off parts of their body before they're even of legal age. If anyone thinks that's not messed up, then I don't understand. And the argument is well, going through puberty is then it's going to lead you to passing harder, and then you'll be more dysphoric. I acknowledge that, but how do we tell the kids who are going to regret it to the ones who the kids who would grow out of it to the ones who won't? We can't. Because it's all just based on subjective, oh, I feel like a girl. We can't. Because granted, these kids can grow up and they can choose to transition later, but the ones that make the mistake, they can never have kids. They can never, a lot of the boys can never have an orgasm, and they have micro penises. They have to live now, they're given gender dysphoria for the rest of their life. So if you want to have a problem with me talking about this, go ahead and have it. Because gay people did not fight for years for their rights to have kids converted to be the opposite sex. That's what happens in Iran. It's not okay to be gay, but we can give you sex reassignment surgery. So we also have implications for women's spaces. Women's sports. I'm not okay with that. Okay. If you are going to be born male and then choose to transition, the least you can do is have respect for women. And trans women and women are not the same. Like, that's an objective fact. And it's not okay to force society to agree with something that isn't true just for the sake of political correctness. Okay? And so few people are talking about this, and you can ask me why I've chosen to do this. You know, I have my reasons, one of them being doing that course. I felt like I indoctrinated so many people. I was thinking, God, I really need to change this. I need to right this wrong. And for some reason, anyway, I'm just rambling now. But like I said before, males being put into women's prisons, like women, biological women, they don't have to be okay with a biological man being in a changing room with you. Like, they don't. We can't demand that of anyone. It's a very complex issue. It is complicated. There's many different components involved. And then it moves me on to the concept of self-ID, which people like Pink News in this country is still advocating for. And that is so dangerous. That means tomorrow I can go to some like legal office and say, I'm a woman. And then I have to legally be recognized in that, being given access to women's spaces. That's messed up. That is not reality. You know, fair enough if you're going to identify as the opposite sex and then go through treatment and then come to a stage of actually walking through life socially as that person and looking like that sex. That's a lot easier to grasp your head around, but self-ID? I mean, how do most people not understand this? And when people see this in the news, they're like, oh my God, this country's so transphobic. No, they're just trying to protect women. They're trying to protect kids. They're trying to protect women and they're trying to protect kids. And it's not transphobic to say so. Okay? Oh, God. This is a long ass video. If you're still with me, heart. So, you know, I don't agree with the whole thing going on in schools, all of that. I talked about that. I don't agree that, you know, people talk about systemic racism. It's a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot more nuances to it than just institutions have, you know, always just suppressed people. These are things that people tell you and you just don't question. So I just want to say, anyone watching this, please go and do your own research. Don't just repeat the things I've said. Please don't. Okay? If you do research and you disagree or you have an interesting thing to refute one of my arguments with, please do, because that's what we need to stop doing. So I'm not pro affirmative action. You know, I think it's actually racist to do that. It's the opposite. If I just got a job because I was gay, like, that sucks. I think the concept of cultural appropriation is stupid. I think that we have better things to be doing than getting offended at someone dressing up as Pocahontas, but then dressing up as an Irish leprechaun and being like, oh, potato, that's fine because I'm white. I don't have time for it anymore. Life is too short. And the whole idea that we have to be like sorry for our ancestors and give you these reparations. Once again, like, you weren't enslaved and I wasn't enslaved. And intergenerational trauma can only go so far. You know, it gets diluted. I talked about healthcare, you know, taxes. The UK should give they should lower corporate tax, because then more companies are going to want to come here and have their offices here. But then if they lower it, everyone's like, oh my God, you're lowering corporate tax. Like, you're allowing corporate greed to take precedent. But actually, if more companies found it appealing to be here, they would have headquarters here and then they would contribute to the economy and bring money in. I acknowledge that there needs to be control over the border and immigration if we want to grow the economy. I don't have the answers to that, and I can see both sides. And I also agree that this country is not the place for religious extremists to be. And if someone is seen actively supporting like terrorist ideas and extreme religions, they need to go, because that's not our culture. People need to assimilate into British culture. You don't have to be the same. You don't have to not follow your religion, but we did not work so hard as a liberal society to gain what we have for that to be what we're allowing in. Does that make sense? Okay. So those are my views, and that is how I left the left. But I want to move on now. And if you're still with me, and if you are involved in this story, hi. A few days ago, I found out that a large group of people I went to drama school with, we were supposed to be having a reunion coming up. I mean, they'll probably still have it, but a WhatsApp group was created about me, and basically people introduced concerns that they very much disagree with what I'm doing, and they wouldn't feel comfortable being in the same room as me, and they wanted to find out how other people felt about it. Now, I think their opinions are totally valid. Like, and I'm really sorry if I've hurt you. You know, I'm sorry if my opinions don't align with you so much that you're hurt. So many of these people I'm really fond of, and this story really saddens me mainly for that reason, not because I'm just hurt that people did this, but I think the whole nature of then everyone bandying on this groupthink and just all adopting the same opinion is very typical of both that year group and also the musical theatre industry. Sorry to say it, but it is. You know, one thing I was so happy about when I left that industry is that I didn't have to take part in any of this bullshit anymore. Everyone is always have this alter ego, performative aspect. I find so much of it is two-faced, and people are always ready to throw each other under the bus. I mean, the same people that are coming at me saying, I can't be in the same room as you because you don't think non-binary is a thing. I've heard them say the most horrible things about other people. And granted, I've not seen some of them for a few years, so they may have completely changed. So I'm not holding you to that. But I have seen enough nastiness and bitchiness and fakeness from that group of people and drama school and the musical theatre industry, but yet I say that I don't agree with gender ideology and make a couple of jokes about TikTok videos, which again, I'm sorry of. And then like, now you can't be in a room with me. And the funny thing is that the meanest people and the most bitchy of people were always the most popular, and they were lifted up on a pedestal. And of course, all of you know how this works. It's just like, it's like secondary school. It's like Mean Girls. And everyone kind of hates them, but everyone wants to be a part of the club. And then when someone starts bitching about someone else, you kind of join in because you don't want to be the outsider. And I was so happy to be free to that. I was like, bye. And I didn't realize for so long how depressing it was. And I was thinking, why did I want to be part of that narrative? And I just want to say that I'm not blaming anyone individually for this. I mean, I'm still largely fond of all these people, and I really hope that you know, things can change, because I find the idea of like never seeing some of these people again, even though we're not close, like very sad. But I think it's the groupthink mentality that's the issue. And I think what I find so cowardly and gross and disgusting is that not one of these people could just come to me and say, hey, Jack, can I talk to you about this stuff? I have some concerns. Instead, it's make a group chat and add everyone else to it and say, we don't want Jack to come to this reunion. This is our opinions on this stuff. And then, of course, even if you have someone there that's going to disagree with you, why would they voice that if the consequences may be getting excommunicated from the group? And then I talked about it saying, like, I was cancelled and this is what happened. And then the replies say, oh, you're not cancelled. I just have a right to choose who I don't socialize with. Sure, you absolutely do. And I would never want to deny you that. But it is cowardly and gross that you would create a group like that without me having the ability to defend myself or offer any other side of the story. So that's why I'm here right now, okay? Most of you, probably all of you will never see this. Who cares? But it's cathartic for me. It's gross. We're all, a lot of those people are 30. I'm 29, about to turn 30. And this is the musical theatre industry. I think I'm like the fourth person in our year to get cancelled. And arguably some other people did like much worse things. So I'm not apologizing for that, but the way people talk about each other is horrible. And some of the stuff that's been said is hypocritical because some people I've heard be nasty on many, many occasions. And what's funny is that at drama school, like, come to me and tell me, like, when I was a bitch, because I spent most of the time trying to be kind to people and really, really wanting to be included and just wanting to be friends. Maybe you disagree, it's fine if you do. But then you see a couple of TikToks and you're like, oh, Jack is like the most hateful person, and make it make sense, okay? Not everything needs to be such a big deal, but there's no space for nuance. And this is why it has to work this way, because if I was actually able to defend myself, people would realize, oh, this isn't as black and white as we think. But if you don't let that happen, then people never have to think that way. And even if people think otherwise, they're not going to say so, because the ringleaders and these people have decided this is the prevailing thought. And if you're not on board with this, we don't want to hang out with you. So, oh, I just don't want to socialize with you. Not the same thing as saying upfront to my face, which no one did, but instead creating this WhatsApp group like that. I think it's juvenile. And look, you can argue that some of those videos are juvenile. I agree. Okay? We all make mistakes. Okay, so moving on. The main issue that is, this always seems to be the most controversial thing, but non-binary is what I think I've upset a lot of people on in the past, online and otherwise. So I want to explain how I feel about this. So I have listened to what non-binary is many times. I used to preach it. It used to be part of the gender training course. And I was on the other side. So don't tell me that, you just don't understand, you're not being empathetic, because I was very much on that side and I was listening to these things all the time and I believed in it. And if I disagree with the concept of non-binary, people are saying, oh my God, you're denying these people's existences. No, I'm not. These people exist, like they are people, they're humans, and they believe a certain thing about themselves. And I believe that they believe it. Okay, I believe they're people and I believe that they believe it. They exist, okay? That's that point. But the whole concept of non-binary and more, it relies on the notion that gender is socially constructed, because then if the concept of what a man is and what a woman is a social construct, you can then identify out of this, or you can identify with both or neither or something else. And now you can create this new social construct. The fact that people have gone so far that we have started to negate science and the fact that we are mammals is weird. Okay? So there are clear biological differences between men and women, and somehow that is controversial to say. There are behaviors and likes and dislikes and all sorts of things which on average are different in men and women. We are mammals and we are designed to procreate. Okay? That's the whole point. It's like animals, their instincts guide them just to make more of themselves. Like, it is that simple fundamentally. And we think just because we're intelligent as a human race and, we have this civilization and all this technology, that somehow we can just like negate the fact that we're men and women. But that's not how it works. We still have innate likes and dislikes and biological tendencies. So for example, men as babies will typically gravitate more towards mechanical objects. And stars, things shaped mechanically. Little baby girls and studies show this, from a young age, they respond more to the eyes and face of their parents before the boy does. So instantly we see different issues. Male more towards the kind of functional side and female more towards the social side. And then this translates into adulthood, right? Women on average gravitate more towards, careers like nursing, teaching, nurturing roles, social work. Men gravitate more towards science and maths and analytical subjects. And, we try and overcorrect that by saying, like, there needs to be more women in STEM, like, it needs to be not sexist. But the reality is that actually, on average, less women are interested in that. So yes, we should make the environment inclusive, but we don't have to have this quota of 50% women, because that's regressive, because on average, women are actually not as interested in that, you know? And then when it comes to kind of behaviors, men tend to be more, they tend to be more wanting to build an empire. Historically, they've been kind of more leaning towards having a huge career than females. And, you know, men on average are more attracted to younger women because it shows fertility. It shows youthfulness and fertility. You know, if a woman is younger, it's probably going to be more likely that she can give birth safely. Women on average are more attracted to men who can provide some security. If you're a woman and you're going to get pregnant, and just imagine this in hunter-gatherer days, right? I'm not talking about right now, but if you're going to be vulnerable and pregnant for 9 months, then you're going to need a mate who is going to protect you, go out and provide for you. And then we have this competitive nature of men to procreate are more inclined to want to spread their seed more, okay? Because then there's a higher chance that they will have offspring. Now, do we see a higher percentage of men cheating on women? Yes. So does that translate? Yes. Is it moral? No. But it does make sense. And that is why men find it a bit easier to disconnect themselves from sex. Women, after having sex with a man, because of oxytocin in their head, I think that's what it's called, they tend to get more attached initially because they are looking for a mate that will stay with them and protect them. And people will say, oh, women dissing other women and being derogatory towards other women and making fun of women's appearances, and women, always feeling like they have to be youthful and beautiful and spend so much money on products. That's all because of the patriarchy. But it's not that simple. You know, women would have to compete for the best mate. And to do that, they would want to appear the most fertile. So they would be trying to look more youthful. And men would want to look for the most fertile. So it comes from both sides. It comes from both sides. Now, there's so many more things I can talk about there. People think that if you believe that there's a difference between men and women, like I'm saying, people will think what I'm saying is sexist, okay? But there's a huge difference between recognizing on average normal distribution, okay? If you're like, oh, what sort of qualities do men have? You know, are they a little bit more stoic or are they very empathetic and emotional? You will see like a normal distribution. So there will be outliers all the time. And all of us are non-conforming to some degree. None of us possess a perfect tick box list of masculine traits and feminine traits. But the issue is that when society decides, oh, you're a man, so then you must have all of those. That's the problem. Because none of us, we're just like our hair color and other biological features, it's a variation. On average, men are a certain height, but you get very short men, you get very tall men, you get very tall women. But that does not erase the concept of height. Okay? And it's also the same with the sexes. So being non-conforming, and myself, there's many aspects of me that are very non-conforming, especially growing up. That doesn't make me another gender, right? It just means I'm a man who is not as inclined towards all of these stereotypes. And that's why I find non-binary is so regressive, because it's saying that, oh, you're not a man or a woman if you don't fit all of these kind of stereotypes. It's just reinforcing that men and women are these kind of stick characters, you know? But then there are so many people who are non-conforming and they're not non-binary, and you're kind of like, what? How does it make sense? And then in argument, people say, oh, well, in the past, you know, this is a Western society construct, but in the past, there's always been tribes with like extra genders and stuff. Yeah, people in the past have done lots of things, like many, many things that were actually incorrect. And surely now, when science is so much more advanced, we can objectively say what a man and a woman is more than then. But when you look at these historical tribes, or like maybe in some places where this still happens, the majority of the time they were just gay men and they needed some kind of word for them. And they didn't want those people to be actually viewed as men because then that would somehow infringe on what the normal male role was to be. So it wasn't like, oh, they had this like extra gender. It was literally that they were gay and they had another word for it. My second problem with non-binary is that anyone can just choose to be it. And there doesn't have to be there's no parameters for being non-binary. You can be as androgynous as day, or you can just be like me. Like how many just like women who just look feminine are non-binary? It doesn't make any sense. And it's kind of sad that so many people feel this inclination to like identify out of their biological sex. Like that's kind of, I mean, I understand with trans people who experience gender dysphoria that it's such a tough experience, and you know, I wouldn't want to wish that on anyone, but for us to be in a society where it's kind of encouraged for you to like disassociate from your biological sex, like that's super weird, and it's not progressive. And in a lot of cases, due to like misogyny and how women are viewed, it's kind of a vehicle to kind of escape from that. But it's not the answer. It's not the answer, in my opinion. So we see this with like Demi Lovato. I'm non-binary. And then a year later, she's like, oh yeah, I'm kind of tired of doing that, so I'm she, her again. It doesn't make sense. I know another girl who was non-binary, and then after a couple of years, people were like, oh, like, but you're non-binary, right? And she said, oh, yeah, I'm not really doing that anymore. I can't stop being gay. Okay? It's not. And someone who's gender dysphoric and needs to transition, they can't take that off. They can't just identify out of it. And gay and transsexual people have, like, there's historical accuracy that is, those traits and anomalies are seen in humans. Non-binary is, like, when I was at drama school with these people, if someone said, what's non-binary, I guarantee you no one would have been able to answer that question. But now it's suddenly this massive thing, and no one is kind of saying, oh, I wonder if this is a trend. It's a trend. It is. I'm sorry, like, I know some of you are going to be pissed off by this, but I don't think it should be a crime to speak the truth, I guess. And look, what really gets me, what I can't deal with this, is if you are a straight person, Demi Lovato, a lot of the time like white and privileged and, you know, maybe just like not that interesting, and you are going to identify into this label and then claim to be LGBT. I find that offensive. I find that's so insulting. Like, find something else to do, you know? So many of us struggled from a young age, like with genuine homophobia and all of this stuff. And then you just like actively adopt the label. And I know most people who are non-binary actually were gay originally, so this isn't a huge majority, but it does happen. And like, that is not the same as gay or trans. Like, it's nowhere near the same. So, you know, why are we abandoning the concept of male and female? Like, we're animals. Non-binary people saying they're trans, that's ridiculous. You know, there's a big difference between someone who is gender dysphoria and needs to transition and goes through all of that pain and suffering. Now, I'm not saying that non-binary people don't suffer, because I guarantee there's something going on for someone to feel the need to say, I'm not a man or a woman. Like, I can't associate myself with either of those things, even though it's all just based on stereotypes. And masculinity and femininity is a spectrum, but like male and female are not. And then we have like non-binary people getting double mastectomies and hormones for 6 months just so they can get a bit more androgynous. You know, it gets to a point where we say, like, is this ethical that someone who just wants to achieve an aesthetic is being given drugs and removing parts of their body. You know, it should be like in extreme cases of like men who are gender dysphoric, women who are gender dysphoric transitioning to men, that you should consider removing a body part. Like it's not just like going to the hairdresser and saying, I want to change my hair, you know? But we have this huge movement of non-binary people. There's actually a surgery where you can change your genitalia so it looks like semi like a penis, semi like a vagina. And there are doctors who are happy to do this. And the next point is that all of this gender ideology, it has infiltrated our institutions. So now it has become fact. And now on a form, it will say, like, I was filling out an application form a few days ago, and it said, what is your gender? And the options were male, female, non-binary, gender neutral, and agender, or other. I don't know who wrote that, but I mean, could they tell you the difference between gender neutral, agender, and non-binary? Probably not. And it's in the hospitals, like they're changing everything gender neutral, you know, like chest feeding, birthing person, which is like the most misogynistic thing, like trying to erase the concept of women because certain men feel like women. Not transphobic to say so. That's literally like fact. And the least they can do is not like erase the concept of what a woman is and be respectful. And the problem with people will say, like, why do you care so much? Like, why can't you just use the pronoun? It's respectful. But the problem is that when you convince a society that something is not based in reality is true, that opens up a whole can of worms, and it is dangerous. Just stay with me here. So we start with trans women are women, full stop. And it's like, okay, well, I can kind of understand that, you know, they go through a lot and they're just trying to live their lives. So like, okay. Then it is that you can be neither gender. So you can be somewhere in between, or you can be both, or you can feel like one the next day and one the following day. And that's this non-binary identity. And these people use they, them. Okay. And then you're sort of like, okay, like that feels quite unnatural. And even if someone's non-binary, like, let's be frank, if someone's non-binary, you're still going to notice whether they're a non-binary boy or a non-binary girl, like instantly. Again, going back to biology, our brains are hardwired from like sexual dimorphism, meaning there's two sexes, that goes back 1.2 billion years. So surely our evolution would have evolved enough to learn how to recognize a male or a female person. Like, is that not kind of like the basics? So that's why people who transition, it actually works, because a lot of them, you notice, at least if you don't clock they're trans and they're passing, then obviously you would instantly use the right pronoun. And otherwise you would still see straight away, oh, they're presenting as female or they're presenting as male. And then you would probably choose to use the correct pronoun because it's polite. But learning to use they, them doesn't work. I mean, even people in the most wokest circles I've been constantly make mistakes. They're like, oh yeah, she was, oh sorry, they. Like it doesn't work. And now we have, when we accept something that's not based in reality is reality, now we have demi-boy, agender, trigender, genderqueer, gender fluid. Okay, it's like, okay, well, what? Do we have to get on board with all that now? Then we have neo-pronouns. And people are saying, well, if you use they, them, then I have to be called Z and Zer. And look, I know that a lot of this is fringe online, crazy TikTok stuff. And I haven't met a Z-Zer, okay? But my issue is that this is a product of us accepting that something that is not true is now fact. And it's based on, I subjectively feel this way, therefore I am this, and you must validate this, and you must view me as that, otherwise you are all these different isms. And I can push back on that. It's not, I mean, it's ridiculous. The truth is important. The truth needs to be acknowledged. And I've noticed on the outside how the musical theatre industry has changed. Now it's like in every program it says, you know, she, her, he, him. Everyone has it on their profile. And I'm there like are you stupid? Like, can you not tell that I'm a guy? And if I here with like a mustache and a nose ring said like he, she, that doesn't make any sense. And people go by like he, they, and she, they, because just have a little sprinkle of the non-binaryism. The problem is that there are literally no rules to this. Like, gay person, You like dick. Right. I get it. Trans person, you feel gender dysphoria, you feel like the opposite sex, and sometimes you transition. Get it. All of this, it has no parameters. And people say, like, non-binary can be whatever it needs to be. And non-binary people don't owe you androgyny. It's like, well, what is it then? Because it's everything and it's also nothing, you know? Like, I saw a Twitter post, and I'm kind of suspicious that this is how people find my channel, but like, someone recently graduated from a drama school, he was like, oh, when you show up to a non-binary audition, there's 5 cis guys in the queue. And he was literally just like a gay guy with earrings. So therefore, why can those other men not audition for the role? Because there are obviously no parameters that you need to fit in, you know? It'd be different if they said, we want gay men to like audition for this, and then there were all these straight men in the queue. Like, that makes more sense. And then we move on from the neo-pronouns, and then some people are saying I'm a trans animal. I know this is like insanity, and most people aren't doing this, but this is what's allowing it, because people are saying, oh, well, if I can just be whatever I think I am, then I'm going to do this. And we get to the point now where people are saying biological sex isn't real, and biological sex is a spectrum. Just because intersex people exist, who are a tiny anomaly of people, and the statistic is overinflated because it includes people that have conditions which actually only impact male and female people, but just have like a chromosomal difference. But sex is based on gametes. You either make sperm or you make egg, and there's nothing in between. It's either one or the other. Some people are infertile. Some people are born with like statistical anomalies, but there are 2 sexes. Like, if you're born with 11 fingers, you don't say that people's fingers are a spectrum. You say this is an anomaly. It's like, I have an autoimmune disease called colitis, where like my colon is kind of messed up. You don't say like, oh, well, humans either have like a healthy colon or like a really bad colon. It's the spectrum. Like, no, you have certain disorders. And the issue, this all stems from queer theory. Like, a lot of people don't know that. It's a social science course similar to gender studies, where it's like a neo-Marxist, postmodernist ideals where we're taught to question basically all of reality, and that nothing is absolutely true. And that our language is actually a construct of reality, rather than our language being like something we use to just describe reality. And it's ridiculous that we're trying to just upend everything and erase the concept of male or female. You see in the animal kingdom how there are gender roles, and like no one's having an issue with that. But we're saying we're so advanced as a society, and now we don't know what a man or a woman is anymore. Like I don't want to be mean. So because this is not true, and it's not actually scientific or based in reality, then I don't have to be on board with this in order to not be labeled as transphobic. And also, I'm so glad I left that industry, because God help me if I was in a show and we all had to say, okay, introduce your name and your pronouns. And I was like, sorry, but like, I don't want to do that. And I don't have to do that. But then, oh no, that's not the narrative, so we don't want to hang out with you. Okay, so these people believe one thing and then I believe something else, but it's like, okay, you're excommunicated. It's like, fine, you guys do you. It's double think. Like, have you read 1984? Because it's heading in that way. And the thing about non-binary as well is that it only works if you don't question it. Once you start questioning it, the arguments don't hold. And I feel like this is why I wasn't added to that group, even if it's on a subconscious level, because people need, it's cult behavior. People need to shut you out and excommunicate you and say, don't listen to that person. Here's what he's like. Don't have the same opinion as him. Otherwise, you're hateful, because the arguments don't make sense. Once you start questioning it, you realize, wait, well, that contradicts that. And like, this doesn't really make sense. And it comes tumbling down. I mean, like, if I was androgynous, this is another thing, is that I was at a festival and bumped into a friend, and he was like, oh, I saw your boyfriend earlier. And he said, I didn't realize you were non-binary now. And I was like, excuse me? And, you know, I didn't tell him how I actually felt, but I was like, no, I'm not. And he said, well, I heard your boyfriend say they're gone to the club. Obviously, he was talking about a group of people. But the whole point is that it's entirely he was like, oh, well, you know, in this day and age, you very well could be. And that's the point. It's like no questions asked. There's no category I have to fill to be non-binary. I guarantee you, if I told that group I'm non-binary, it would be like 0 questions asked. And because I'm expressing this and certain people say they can't be in the same room as me, who's more regressive? Because I'm willing to be in the same room as you, even though you believe in this, which is actually not real. Right? Like, non-binary is an idea, okay? It's a concept. And in the same way that I respect religious people, I'm like, you guys live your life. If faith helps you, go and do it. I respect that. But I can also say to them, I'm not religious. I don't believe in God, without me being like shunned and never spoken to again. And this is the same thing. It's like us having a musical theatre program and saying like Jack Keane, brackets, atheist. And then the next person like brackets, Jewish, you know? It's an idea. And my issue is that when the idea becomes now socially forced and you must use the pronouns or else you could lose your job or you're misgendering someone, misgendering is violence. That's not how the world works. And if you think that, if you're like thinking, oh, well, you're going to upset so many people, then I'm sorry, but I'm not going to deny reality for the sake of not offending someone. Like, I'm not doing it. I did that. Been there. Did that for like a long time. So 2-hour conversation. My throat's parched. But all in all, if any of you are watching this, absolutely no hate. I have good thoughts about most of you. And if anything changes in the future, my doors are always open. If you're happy to like disagree, if anyone wants to talk to me about this, again, doubt you're watching just on the off chance, very open to it. And I wish all of you so much happiness and success. I think so many people have been killing it and I'm very happy for them. And I really hope that society can move forward in a way of us being more tolerant of different opinions and just being able to get along, even though we're not always on the same page. So I can let it go. Happy to do that. And that is it, everyone. So if you liked this and you're new to my channel and you're still here, which is very surprising, please consider subscribing, like this video, click the notification bell to not miss any. And I want people to find my channel, as many people as possible. Some videos in the works, so you'll see those soon. But other than that, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.